So after recently riding the 2025 Harley-Davidson Street Bob, I was really looking forward to getting on the Low Rider ST. And to be honest, I was fully expecting, basically a better Street Bob. A Street Bob on steroids, so to speak. Faster, better handling, and way more exciting. But you know what they say about never meeting your heroes. So before we sink too deep into my disillusionment, let's run through some important numbers as usual. The engine is a 1917cc Milwaukee 8117, the high output variant. Seat height is 715 millimeters. The weight is 323 kilograms. Yes, 323. Power is 114 horsepower at 5,000 RPM, and torque is 174 Newton meters at 4,000 RPM. Fuel capacity is 19 liters, and the price on the road is about $90,000. $90,000 for an air-cooled twin-cylinder motorcycle. At that price, it should come with a therapist as well. But anyway, as mentioned earlier, with the Low Rider ST, I was expecting a better performing Street Bob, more power, better handling, and better wind protection. And in a way, I did get what I wished for, and I also got the exact opposite of what I wanted. First impressions, the Low Rider ST immediately feels heavier and taller than the Street Bob, and the numbers back this up. The Low Rider's seat height is about 715 millimeters compared to the Street Bob's 680 mm, and it weighs roughly 323 kilograms in running order versus the Street Bob's 293 kilograms. So the Low Rider is 35 millimeters taller and 30 kilograms heavier. Unfortunately, this is something I do feel at low speed. Right off the bat, the bike feels more like a touring Harley than a cruiser. And to make matters worse, it actually feels a bit top heavy. But that's to be expected when you raise the seat height and you bolt a fairing the size of a small parachute onto the frame. Now let's look at the actual riding position. Those bars are pretty wide, and although there's generous pullback, the seat itself is also set quite far back. So unless your hands drag on the floor when you walk, you're going to be stretching a bit on this bike. At full steering lock, I have to slide forward just to keep my hands on the bars. And for this reason, I totally understand why so many Low Rider ST owners immediately spend another $1,500 or $2,000 on taller bars and pullback risers. After all, what's another $2,000 on top of a $90,000 bike, right? Now let's talk about low speed handling. Harley says this is a lightweight performance bagger, and I do wish they would stop saying that. This is a 323 kilogram motorcycle. Pushing the bike in and out of a parking lot, I'm not even pretending to look confident. Even small steering inputs send my arms to full extension. This is a bike where moving it around dismounted is not plan B, it's the smart, sensible way. This is just not an easy bike to move around. In fact, it's the kind of bike where you need to choose your carparks carefully, very carefully. So how does the Low Rider ST ride in the city? Well, it rides like a big Harley with a fairing and saddlebags, because that's exactly what it is. Sure, it's got a high output engine, which gives it more peak power than, say, something like the Street Bob's classic tune engine, You get 114 horsepower versus 98, which means this engine has hotter cams, a better intake, and freer flowing exhaust. But low-end torque between both bikes is basically identical, which is to be expected since they both share the same engine capacity. The high output engine on the Low Rider does seem to have a bit more mechanical clatter, more vibration, and unfortunately a bit more heat as well. So alright, into the underground car park now. Let's see how this bike handles things. Because this is where a bike's weaknesses really start showing. For slow speed turning, this is where the Low Rider's top heaviness really screams at you. The amount of maneuvering room suddenly becomes very important. Like I said, and I'll say it again, you need to choose your car parks carefully if you're riding this bike into town. A good thing though is that the fueling on this bike is excellent. The stall resistance is fantastic, especially for something this heavy. Here in first gear, hands off the throttle, the bike just tractors along on idle. It can't quite do this in second gear, but overall the fueling is smooth and very predictable and confidence inspiring. So credit where credit is due. Once on the move, out in the open and at higher speeds, that's when the Low Rider ST starts showing us its strengths. It really feels planted and stable and very willing and eager to lean. It corners beautifully as well, not quickly, but beautifully. And once you commit to a line mid-corner, you will be staying on that line, because this bike isn't changing direction willingly. The suspension is excellent overall. There's this controlled, pliant and stable feel that's genuinely satisfying. Just that this bike always feels big. That feeling never really goes away. Maybe it's the fairing, maybe it's the riding position, maybe it's the sporty suspension, or maybe it's all of the above. Whatever it is, you're constantly aware that you're on a substantial motorcycle. And speaking of the fairing, I'm finding that the stock windscreen is sending wind straight into my helmet at eye level, which leads to a uniquely peculiar problem. You see, I enjoy riding cruises with my visor up. You know, that wind in the face feeling and listening to the mechanical symphony of the engine. I confess, from my perspective, it's all 100% true. Yet on this bike, the wind is slapping my eyelids so aggressively, I can barely keep them open. And if this were my bike, I'd be getting a different screen. Or more likely, and honestly, I'd probably just skip the fairing entirely and go for the Low Rider S, the version that comes without the fairing or saddlebags. I mean, I do like the twin brake discs and inverted forks of the Low Rider platform. It's just nice to have less stuff hanging off that front end. Because I can't help but feel the ST fairing and mounting hardware may contribute in a way to that top heavy feeling of this bike. Again, this is my personal perspective based on how I ride and sit on the bike. This engine is also leaving me a little, shall we say, conflicted. It's mechanical, but a little too clickety-clackety at idle. And once moving, the big twin pulses don't really come on through very strongly. Don't get me wrong, it feels thoroughly modern, smooth and well engineered, and that's normally a compliment. But on a Harley, especially a model like this one. I was kind of expecting a bit more of that iconic character to come true. Sure, in some other markets you can fit freer flowing pipes and remap the bike into a snarling, vibrating, thundering monster. But here in Singapore you need to ride it legally or else, which means the bike stays as it is. The question you need to ask is, can you live with that? And I know this can sound a bit melodramatic, but I literally know of people who have packed up and relocated just in order to be able to ride their bikes with open pipes. So if you're a die-hard Low Rider ST fanboy, you can make it work as a city bike. Just avoid start-stop traffic, pick the right car parks, and pretend 320 kilograms is just another number. But for most people, this bike is going to be hard work in the urban jungle. It's heavy, it runs a little warm, and depending on your proportions, the cockpit can stretch your upper torso and pull muscles you never knew you had. On the open road, touring, sweeping corners, long cruises, this bike is absolutely going to shine. It's stable, comfortable, capable, and has a presence that makes you feel like you're riding something special. And in a sense you are. But in the city it feels like a caged animal. A very large, very heavy, very expensive caged animal. Still, if you love the Low Rider ST, I mean really love it, you'll figure out a way to make it work.